Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Here's a quote just for this episode. Something we cannot see protects us from something we do not understand. The thing we cannot see is culture in its intrapsychic and internal manifestation. The thing we do not understand is the chaos that gave rise to culture. If the structure of culture is disrupted, chaos returns. We will do anything to defend ourselves against that return. Opening preface, Maps of Meaning, Dr. Peterson.
Hmm.
Our guest today, friend of the Culture Matters podcast, steward 30 days of thoughts, holding in my hand here, going way back, episode 55, the Culture Matters podcast. The one and only Andrew Berman. If you've been following along with us, we've been doing 30 days of thought for years, really, but many sessions on 30 days of thought. The purpose of 30 days of thought is to read, to think, write, to develop, and speak, to let go. Keep in mind, there wasn't much listening going on in the writing and development of the meditation that is 30 days of thought. Andrew Berman joins us this week as we talk about free will, among other things. Andrew, thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast to discuss 30 days of thought.
Good to be here. Always good to be here and talk about something that you know, like free will. I mean, I do believe, with the exception of extreme circumstances, we do have free will. I know in the book, I feel like you're the passage you're saying that we don't necessarily have free will. So I'm like I almost was going to listen to your passage, like your recording. So I love the way actually. So we have the book, which we get to see, like, and read your original, writing, and then, ideally, hopefully, the listeners here have the book, write their own interpretation, maybe even record a video. But then actually, we could also go back and listen to this podcast and hear your interpretations. I didn't listen to it because I wanted to I didn't want to, like, cloud my judgment and my thinking about what I believe free will is, because I believe we do have free will. I mean, there are a few examples where we don't have free will, and this is going to be like, maybe like some kind of mental illness, or drug addiction. But when we choose everything, I mean, use like extreme example of like Viktor Frankl. He chose, as in the shittiest of environments, in the worst scenario you could possibly imagine. He chose, to be a positive mindset and create this manuscript in his head that he would later become a book. So I believe we do have free will. Um, what are your feelings?
As free as a chained lion who knows no world outside of the cage he reigns king over. His dimensional awareness is limited by his view of life. To King Lion, he believes he is the master of his universe, the ruler of his jungle, master of his cage, who knows no other environment but only the one he has laid claim over. I, I'm thinking about the the relationship between the CEO and the executive team.
Hmm.
Like the CEO by authority has, is almost the arbiter of truth in the sense, like ultimately the decision, the where we're going, what we're not doing, what we are doing, the ultimate decision maker is going to decide, what is the relationship between the truth and their decision and how the people that comprise that group share their points of view with that person. Like, so the if the group, let's put it this way, if the people that comprise the group are not sharing all the information that they have at their disposal, or their ability to share the information that they have at their disposal, their ability and their capacity, their willingness has a relationship with their relationship in respect to the leader. The leaders, the way the leader relates to them, to each of them as individuals, and then as an average of the group, increases or decreases the likelihood that each person will share the information that they have at their disposal. The information that they have at their disposal influences the decision tree of the ultimate decision maker. Because they're making their decisions based on the information at their disposal. But if the individual, if the ultimate decision maker is, let's use an extreme, they're not listening to any information outside of what they already think.
Okay.
Like
So
they're
so
not,
they're
let's use an extreme. They're not listening to any feedback other than what they already think.
so they're not aligned with this leader who's saying
No,
this
I mean
is
the leader. Let's say the leader is not listening to
okay.
the team at all.
Got it.
Like
Got it.
0%. Use an extreme to make it, because this is where my head goes in this conversation. Because I don't know the answer. That's why I'm writing the thought. If they're not, they have they can replace everyone in that setting
Hmm.
because they have control over the fate of each person.
So do they do that until they find people that align with their decision rather than accept the feedback? Say, okay, your decision making is not in line with what I think is appropriate. You're out and I keep replacing people as the leader until I find people that align with my decision.
No, I'm saying, well, I would argue most of what I'm trying to get at here is unconscious.
Okay,
Like if, and I'll use this alliteration to it spark some thoughts for people is, let me just get through it first.
sure.
The ability of the person in that position of authority, influence, power to decide has a relationship with the information presented to them. They How they relate to the team influences the capacity by which the information is presented to them. It influences that capacity. If they don't have the information available to them, then they're destined to make the same decision they otherwise would have made with had the information. Like if they're not listening, then the information that's being presented to them will not be, uh, it will not influence or synthesize and impact that decision. So it's like how do you actually, so their ability to decide has a relationship Yeah, the ability to decide has a relationship with the information available to them. The more information broadens the choice. The less information lessens the choice.
Hmm.
But the capacity to ingest information has a relationship with how we relate to information, anomalous information, novel information, unknown information. I can stop. So this is like the closed mindset. I can stop new information. I'm cutting it down.
Yeah.
But like the question is that me stopping it, or is it something physiologically, psychologically that's stopping new information?
I mean,
So
is it all?
yeah, so sorry, okay. My
Is it you as a leader that has just from from past experience that you know that right now any additional information is not going to influence your decision, and as leaders, like sometimes it's like we know we know and maybe we think we know, um you know the direction because we've been through this before. And new information is just going to waste my time and delay action. And I mean, let's just face it, like leaders, the one of the reasons why leaders are successful is because they're taking action and not, consuming so much information and belaboring over actually a decision and listening to all these actually opinions, because they've been through it before. And yeah, of course, sometimes they screw up and sometimes they bump into things and mess things up and break things. But they learn from that actual experience of going through that and know, hey, that was the emotion that I felt last time. This feels similar to this. I don't think I need any more information.
Yeah, that it doesn't mean that they have free will. It's the decision to choose is within a spectrum of awareness that has a relationship with their environment, the people, how we relate to those around us. Like the this whole concept of um then the whole movement around um you know triggers and blind spots, that the implicit foundation of the that train of thought is that there isn't free will, because the response is physiological, is it happens before I have the chance to do anything about it. All of that. So which one do we believe as a society? We have to make that choice. I think it's both. I think we we are within a context, or like, you know, we can't, at the limits of our understanding, the limits of our knowledge, the limits of our own self-understanding is the limits of our will. And like this is the value of like forgiveness and compassion, because the more real our relationship, I'm going to meet you at the limits of your will, the limits of your compassion, the limits of your empathy, the limits of your persona. Like if we get in a fight about something, like why are we even fighting? Like we're not even fighting each other. We're we're engaged with something that isn't even our identity. It's something else. It's trash from the past. It's like we're fighting the unconscious, like we're fighting demons. Our demons are fighting one another. And it's like I hope that when you're down on your worst and your demon's out, and it's like almost like there's Andrew, and then there's like this devil around him attacking me. I'm hoping that I'm at my best so I can, using memory, remember, you who you once were, and like hopefully I have compassion for you in that moment. I'm at my best. You're at your worst. When I'm at my worst, you're at your best. But like, how easy is it for us not to do that? Now both demons are fighting one another, and now we just don't talk anymore. And or 40 years goes by, and I don't have the humility. I want the relationship, but I don't want it more than I want my pride. So I'm not going to call you. I'll wait for you to call me. So do I have free will, or am I being, or am I, have I succumbed to the nature of my will? And so my free will be relative to how I relate
Yeah.
in that context. So the question becomes, how do I build up my will? Because what I really want is to call you, or is to have the relationship rather, and being the first one to reach out. If I never reach out, then it never happens. It's just that like, you know, the probability that you reach out. Well, if I'm not the person that'd be willing to reach out to you, would I be, would I be the person that'd be willing to answer the phone call from you? Probably not. So I'm saying it's paradoxical. It's there's a and so the paradox of free will has a relationship with awareness of the self, which has a relationship with the past, the culture, the future, like my future orientation, how much effort I put into figuring out where I'm going, and practice, some type of meditation, or you know,
Yeah.
and this is all just like exploration. I'm not painting philosophy. I'm just thinking out loud.
And I'm going to add to that, even in environment. Like I just saw an email from a dear friend of mine, and at some point our relationship was strained because his girlfriend at the time didn't like me. Like for whatever it was, I think actually maybe at the time she blamed bad influences or things that were going on in his life on me. But I happened to I came across this email where he was my closest friend at the time, and he was stopped from communicating with me and having actually our friendship and pursuing our friendship. So it's circumstances, too. As with him, it was his girlfriend, a fiance, I guess. I think, yeah, it was actually for fiance during that time.
Hmm.
So free will, you look at it as like on a it's not overall free will, because we all have free will to choose. Like I could decide if I'm going to go to the bathroom in my pants right now. Like that is free will. Like we have like decisions, but it's basically it's on the decisions or things that we could take. We don't necessarily have ultimate free will because of the constraints of whatever environment we're in.
I am not sure. I, I'm not sure which. Uh, I don't. That's why I was thinking about this in the book here. Is I don't know. I don't know. I would be weird. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
And I
Unsure.
my my
Unclear.
my take is that I think we always do have free will, but with the exception of like, those couple of circumstances, and one could say even in those circumstances, even the addict, even the person who has let's say schizophrenia, maybe not schizophrenia, maybe that's where you lose any kind of free will. But the and I would say actually some to some level the addict, and especially if they have a chemical dependency that is somewhat in their maybe in their bloodline, um, where it's difficult for them to do anything else besides if they're a heroin addict and they wake up in the morning, that's all they think about because they're sick. If they don't get, some opiates in their body, they can't think. They can't do anything else besides, figure out how to get that first high of the day. So that's a case where there's no free will. Those people are, absent of free will of anything. They can't decide if they're going to read a book or go hug their mom.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, I just think, what's the difference between that and the person that puts on their suit, gets in the car, drives to work, listens to the same radio snippet from the day before, gives their sales script out loud, thinks about how they're going to overcome objections from the potential buyers of the product they may or may not conceive as purposeful in the greater expanse of time and space.
Speaking
And
of, I'm
is
sorry.
Lucido's here to say
I
that?
know, like as you say, speaking expanding time and space, I feel like what an appropriate moment for Mr. Lucido to take this,
Or just
to that next level. Hello, Mr. Lucido, you handsome devil, you.
So first of all,
welcome. Wow.
are we doing free will here?
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
So I
we're
decided to.
live, so
So
just come in.
I just decided to join by my own free will. I just thought you guys would understand. Hey, look, what's the old saying in life? Better late than never.
Yeah, amen.
So, so how deep are you guys into this?
I think I'm about to be canceled.
What did you say now, Jay?
I, I don't know if I'm saying anything.
Uh,
What I was trying to I think Andrew he had mentioned people that may be under the influence of some type of methadone or amphetamine, drug relationship, lack the will to decide or grasp an identity beyond that
mhm.
proclivity to use those drugs. And I was likening that to how is that any different than me putting my suit on at 5:30 a.m., listening to my Les Brown motivational tapes, saying my sales scripts, getting in my car, listening to the same radio from the day before, and not thinking about the identity of the organization or the product and the purpose of its, existence in the marketplace, and orienting myself around the sales goal that some amorphous blob of a management team shit out of its PR department based on my Netflix addiction, unhappy marriage, stress from the mortgage payments and college I can't afford.
So you're just basically life in general is what you're.
Yeah, like so I was just throwing in a wrench that, why not? It's free will.
It is free will, and you know what? That's the best thing about these discussions. Um, I was just listening to the one we did. By the way, that was a good one. You were right. I forgot about that one. The one that we did on self culture. Good stuff. Good stuff.
What was it that stuck out?
Oh well, you know what? I would That's a good question. For me, I think it was just I felt like we all were very, I felt that we were all on point, number one. And I think what I got out of it was that self culture starts with one's self over the years. And, again, it goes through a series of actions, behaviors, as we talked about, and it got into, you know, how does one influence culture? Of course, in the organization piece we talked about, and we covered so many things. But I would say this. I would say if someone's interested, they just need to listen to it because it's really good. It was a really good, good version of talking about what culture means. And I will tell you guys really quick, just a very sideline. I'm imposing my own free will now by just crashing this party. Um, we at PRMG, for example, are really now getting into this whole culture thing. Everybody is talking about it. It's on the
Oh,
tip of everybody's tongue. Some people dismiss it as Falderah, that it doesn't mean a whole lot, that people are just jumping on the bandwagon and saying it. Others are saying, no, it's very palpable and very real. I'm one of the very palpable, very real people. I know Andrew, you as well. We've talked about it before. And of course, Jay is the master ambassador of it. But it is becoming more and more important, especially to the people that feel that the culture piece brings value. And the value I'm talking about is just the behaviors of the organization. It all boils down to people. We were trying to pinpoint in our own organization, well, what do we mean by culture? What do we mean by all that? And at the end of the day, I believe it all boils down to us as individuals contributing to the whole, if you will. And everything else that happens is just a byproduct or a result of that manifestation, if you will. Um, but I don't want to. I just digressed and made this about culture. I want to get into the free will piece. How deep are you guys in? What have you defined free will? What was the initial definition? I know what it is for me because I read this. I've done free will, I think, twice. Andrew, did we do it once or did we do it twice?
I think I only know it once, but me it's possible we did it twice. I only thought we did it once, but
I mean, I wasn't
uh,
sure if we did it with Jay one time. I'd have to go back and look at that. Didn't we do one with Jay?
I don't know. Um,
Hmm.
my
Okay.
my like you know what it is if we use that guy that is in his car listening to the same audio book, doing the same thing and trying to meet his mandated sales quotas based on whatever last quarter's activity was. Like, so they have less maybe less um free will than, let's say, a dictator.
Right.
Like, a dictator of a country, has probably the most free will. They can
Okay.
do whatever the fuck they want. A rich country dictator, they decide actually what they want. So, so maybe like that's like 100, like a country dictator, and then zero would be like the drug addict, the heroin addict, who has schizophrenia. That's like zero. Like, they have no control over anything. And then the extreme is like a dictator. Maybe I don't know that this is necessarily where they kind of control their entire world. And I guess to Jay's point, but they're just their world, not the world. Um, but and maybe it's a 0 to 100.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the
Hmm.
dictator to fall in the same category as the,
Heroin addict.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
see what you mean because there's
expand, expand on that. I kind of, I could see, because they're basically have created their own cage, like the lion. So okay,
Well, and
continue.
the reason I have that impulse, I believe, was because when I was writing this, I'm fighting my own demons. Like so the short term, impulsive, hedonistic, Machiavellian component of my personality, it it if I am walking down the street and I'm holding my wife's hand and I'm smiling and thinking about how wonderful our life is, and all of a sudden giant titties like slap me in the face. I am now thinking about those giant titties. That is not my wife. I'm disrespecting the covenant that I've made before God. And I am now in a battle of good and evil. Star Wars shit, Lord of the Rings, everybody. And if this is happening 30, 40, 50 times a day, how free am I?
Well, first of all, I think we got to get back and analyze just how many times are you getting slapped by these giant titties in a day?
I got Paul to say a bad word. This is the I'm really a terrible. This is
You're
a
gonna have to bleep all that out,
Oh,
buddy. I
oh,
just don't.
there you go. You
But
check
it
check
is free
check that
will.
bingo box. Paul saying giant titties. Okay, there you go.
Let me bring this back to reality before I totally digress us. So at least it's a real conversation now. So we could talk about Will. So I, the dictator for a second. This is
Mhm.
somebody that I think, because at a very microscopic level, I've made these mistakes in my adolescence, following short-term impulse, like over time, I'm alienating myself from other people. I'm alienating myself from the best of myself. When I think of a dictator that runs a country, right, they could do anything. They could take advantage of anyone's soul, like anyone's personhood. Hey, bring this person in or I'm gonna, you have to do this or I'm gonna kill you, or, you can't speak or you can't think, you're going to jail. They could take someone's personhood away from them. What impact does that have on their psychology, on their individuality, when their conscience over time, because in another universe they're that person,
Yeah.
powerless, losing their agency, like the other person's agency has a relationship with their determination of their agency. And like, what does that do psychologically to the dictator? They might have control over their agency materialistically or physiologically, culturally. Like, what happens to that dictator's soul, conscience, individuality over time? They're eaten up by their own
Yeah.
harem, their own. So, like, I believe me personally, when I was writing this thought, I was thinking through my own tyrannical autobiography, my own infantile, immature compulsions that a dictator could very well easily act out without any consequences,
Hmm.
or less consequences, commit all sorts of atrocity, just do whatever the hell they want when they want. What are the costs to that to them from their as a standpoint of their will, whatever that means? It's a decaying of anything that you would say would make them human versus something arbitrary, something like mechanistic.
Hmm.
Everything's now just a number, and it's
Hmm.
like Stalin saying that, a tragedy is a death, but a million people is a statistic. Like the death of a million people is a statistic. The death of one person's a tragedy.
Hmm.
So that's where I want to just kind of throw something in there.
I, I need to make sure I'm tracking where you're going because you said a lot there. I understand. I believe I understand what you're implying. So you help me land my plane here. So You're talking about one imposing their will upon another or on a vast majority of people, having enough power and influence to impose, using their agency, imposing their will, and that will therefore impacting the reactions of others. Now, you have to keep in mind each of the other, all the others, the that community, that mass of people, what not, however you want to describe it, each have their own free will to make decisions. But if I'm hearing you right, based on the impact of the protagonist, is that the right word? Instigating their will upon others, imposing their will upon others, might limit what those choices will be within their range of choice, right? So that part I got. The other part is what gives them the gumption to impose their will and believe that their will is so right, so righteous that they can just come through like a bulldozer, like a tidal wave, and just take over a country or whatever. I don't know the answer to that because I've
Hmm.
always wondered about that too. What gives people that motivates them to that point? And then to the point, I think, where you guys were going about whether they're under the influence of drugs, that definitely could be a deciding factor or definitely a factor in what how they might make those decisions. We all know under the influence of alcohol, drugs, opiates, opioids, whatever you want, all that could impact and affect one's decision. And whether they have a condition, a pre-diagnosed condition, like you said, like schizophrenia, or even some autism or Asperger's or some other condition that might contribute to how they process thought. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's so much that could contribute to why does a person behave the way they behave? And then I will challenge you with, do we actually truly have free will? And I don't know that you guys have touched on that, but based on everything I have read from the people that purport to know, they say that we actually do not have free will. At a macro level, we do, but not at a micro level. That at a micro level, everything is just almost, for lack of a better way to say it, is predetermined. And we're predisposed to it. So all these decisions, all these conversations, everything that's flowing out of my mouth right now is already, that thought has already taken place at a much deeper level. And even though I think I'm the thinker of the thought, I'm being bamboozled because something's happening at a much deeper level. I might say, well, that doesn't really matter to me because it doesn't really impact the way I feel and think about my life. I do feel that I have control of my decisions. I would assume you two both as well. We are processing thought right now. We're thinking things through. Are you trying to tell me that everything I'm saying has already been thought through? It sure doesn't feel like it, but so
It
there's
depends how honest you are with me.
that's yeah, but it's happening at a chemical level, right? Something very very we're talking at something deep in the synapse. You might even go further to say it's happening at an atomic level. But again, I go back to that comment that's very hard for people to really get. I've heard Sam Harris debate it with Sean Carroll. I think I've heard Joe Rogan talk about it. I could be wrong about that, but I believe Joe has interviewed people. But Sam Harris is the one that really pushes that narrative really strong. In fact, his wife, Annika, wrote a book called Consciousness. In fact, I just started to crack the book open. It's thin, but once I get through it, I'd like to bring that back into our
Yeah.
conversation. Okay, anyway, sorry about that.
No, that's great.
I just, those
I
are
wrote
things that I
this
want
down
to,
while you were sharing, like the immediate belief in free will. Um, it invokes the idea that one may be entirely unfree. Just like I guess like uh, we've as a species been exploring this for some time.
right.
I think maybe there's value there's value in the exploration of whether that is or is not. It's an awareness exercise. It's a
It's good.
it's an awareness exercise. It's a, you know, what what could be the consequences of my actions
Mm-hmm.
on my future response to their consequences.
Hmm.
What could the consequences be of my actions and my future response to those consequences?
Right. Well, it'd be nice if people would think that far ahead, but sometimes they don't, right? I mean, if you're going to plan to take over a country, I would actually have to say if you're planning to take over a country, you have to be pretty bold, sure-footed in what you believe. So your convictions and proclivities, man, are pretty dialed in. And I think that you probably already have a good idea of what the reaction is going to be and what those consequences might be. But you might view that as I don't care about that. I know that's going to happen, and therefore I'm still going to do this. Kind of, I'm going to take this action.
But what if freedom, or sorry, what if free will has a relationship with speech?
I think it
Because like
does.
think of the First
Yeah.
Amendment, right? The freedom to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
Peterson says a lot, when you can't speak, you can't think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if the society is controlling our speech, inadvertently will control our thoughts.
Yeah.
And then we lose our individuality. So there's a relationship with speech. Like look at this in a corporate organizational setting. So like I think culture is this amorphous thing, but it comes down to, can we, like what we're doing, we're creating a culture, the three of us, just by showing up to this. This becomes something meaningful. This is a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a cadence to it. There's a story to it. There's a leader. Like, because I started by doing the book, and now there's more than one leader. There's multiple influencers here in your own domains. There's a story, there's a ritual. The story that's manifesting itself explicitly, of like reading to think, writing to develop, speaking to let go. Implicit, there's all these knots being unraveled. There's exploration.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's a hierarchy, but there's the value system that is creating equilibrium with that hierarchy. Like I learned from, we're equal under God. We're equal under the superimposition of the idea of 30 Days of Thought, is that this is not my book, it's our book and
Right.
each listener's book. And I wrote this because I don't know the answer. So in that, everyone has a space to share what they think and what they feel and learn from one another. There's a
This.
culture manifesting. So it's
Yeah.
like this, where I'm going with this is like, what relationship does it have? And then I think of companies that I shadow, or we're working around, when the people can't speak, whether that's a law or whether that's an unspoken nuance. When the people can't speak, they're omitting.
Yeah, that's true. That's
It
a good
starts to
point.
suffocate the
Mm-hmm.
culture. So that when we talk about free will, there's so much influence on a macro sense of what a company could do, a country could do to influence, to undermine free will.
Wow. Okay. So, you the narrative, if you will, whatever the main narrative is, that could undermine a lot of things, but also the independent free will of each thinker, of each speaker, of each behavior can also undermine the main narrative and begin to shift it and change it. So I think it's relational. There's no doubt about it. We have the freedom to speak, to essentially do certain things within our control, and I say within our control because at the end of the day, let's be honest, it is within our control to do certain things. There are things that we can attempt to do that might not be within our control that could have dire consequences. I mean, what really is free will in the grand scheme of things? We've all agreed to some kind of narrative to govern our state, to govern our country, to govern certain behaviors. We've all agreed to this doctrine, this narrative. Okay, we are going to behave this way. We all agree. Do you agree? Yeah, we agree. This is it. So everybody needs to act accordingly, type thing. And we all do that, whether it's in an organization or whatever. In this case, with us, this book is kind of driving the narrative. So it's kind of laying out the narrative. This is the narrative, but now we all are responding to it in a way that might be a little bit of a different opinion, right? I tend to move more toward in the direction of, again, that's based on my interests and being influenced by others, to talk about it more at, well, what do you guys think about it more at a molecular level? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Or, you know what? No, I don't think that way. I do believe I have total control, total free will, and my free will is driven by morals and values and my upbringing and how I make my decisions, how I behave, how I react is all a result from day one coming into existence up to right now. Could that shift or change? Possibly, because I could be influenced by other elements, other people, other ideas, other ideologies. There's so many things that can impact what my predisposition is as it relates to free will. So, what I want to get out of this conversation is when you wrote this up, Jay, what were you digging for? What is your definition in your mind? What do you define free will from your perspective? Because I think that's what Andrew and I were trying to get out of the book. So, thank you. And so I think that's what I'm trying to understand. And yes, I do
This
think
sentence
that.
here. Go
Say it
ahead.
again.
Go
No,
ahead.
no, please.
At the bottom of page 20,
Hmm.
his biggest albatross may be his belief in freedom.
There you go. Right there. Right there.
I'm skeptical. I want to be skeptical.
Hmm.
And I've had uh, this string I've been trying to pull out, like that Will has a relationship with forgiveness
Hmm. How do you mean? Explain.
because it's like suffering clouds judgment,
Hmm.
and
Right.
love clarifies and cuts. It's like, what does grace do for people? It's like a cleansing of the palate.
I was going to say it's like a relief.
If I believe in God, I truly believe. I've decided I've let my rational mind die. And now my behaviors are even modeling this concept. So there's a meditative process of my ontology,
Hmm.
my being, the nature of who I am is adapted as a consequence of this belief. I am going to live by these values of this company of life.
Are you
There's a
saying?
cleansing of the palate in grace. In the absence of grace, in the absence of a belief in God, I might have to spend my whole life trying to track down all the people that I've sinned against and meet them right where they are and to look at them and take ownership of my transgressions upon their culture, their life. Because a part of me is a barb in their soul. I've got a barb in this person, a barb in this person, a barb of this person. I've every person that I've ever met in my life, I've touched. And if we get, an average, there's 11 people that I've spiritually killed.
Hmm.
I told this one person when they rolled the window down, they cut me off at a red light. Fuck you. Like I spiritually, this is a not a, alliteration. That's somebody that there's one space, one time. That's my report card for that interaction that
That's
will
right.
live
That was,
forever in the expanse of time.
well,
What
I
I'm
like
trying
that.
to say here, Paul, is like, dude,
Yeah.
this is some serious shit.
Hmm.
There's only so many human beings that I've ever come across in my life. What's my report card?
Yeah.
It's a fucking F. So I need God to give me a break. Give me
But
a break.
okay, you might have some Fs. You have a bunch of A's.
There you
You
I
have a lot of
go.
you have a lot more A's than
I
you do than you do
my
F's.
whole life is spent around trying to get A's because of how much shame and embarrassment and guilt I have.
Oh, Jay.
Which what I'm trying to say is like I need a break. I can't keep going on like this. I can't keep living with this shame and the guilt. And so, man, what the hell does this have to do with free will? Everything, because I'm not free.
Yeah, you're reacting without thinking, maybe. You're
And
reacting
why do I have this
to the environment.
conscience? Why? If I didn't, maybe I don't think so I think conscience and free will has a relationship.
Hmm.
And so that's my whole, and I don't even think this is my idea. That's the funny thing. This is just a reflection of my own autobiography. So that
Well,
what I was thinking, I'm not thinking writing this. I am reflecting the barb in me.
look, if you really think about everything you just said, it goes back to, this is what I believe. It goes back to everything that's occurred, every event, every interaction through your life as you are going through this process, this heuristics, however you want to call it, as you're moving through pragmatically, whatnot, you're going through life and things are happening, events are coming your way, stimuli, interactions with different people. We all have low moments. Let's be real. I have plenty in my life that I regret, that I wish I could go back and just fix. For a minute there, I thought you were kind of going on a trip of, I need to go and reconcile things with others, reconciliation. I got to go out
Of
there and, you know,
thousands.
yeah, and make, and make this right. But yeah, I go back to the same thing. I'm sticking with my narrative, morals, values, which are all part of what you adopt as you grow and become who you are. You got to rely on those things sometimes. I do the same thing. I've thrown a finger many a time out the window to people, that cut me off, and then I go, why did I do that? Was that really necessary? Um, Sometimes it's the opposite way, where somebody does it to me, and I go, and then I put myself in check. Is my immediate reaction just to throw one back, or do I try to find a way to understand where maybe that person might be coming from, and maybe what I did really was more offensive than I realized? Question is, do you have enough time to process all that in that moment? The finger's the quickest response. It's easy, it's fast. Boink, there it is. But the reality of it is that I think all of us are all aiming to be better, a better version of ourselves as we move through life. The idea is as you learn from your mistakes and experiences, how do you shape that into being the best version of yourself? And I believe, to Andrew's point, and Andrew, I like what you said, but there's a lot of A's in there versus the F's, that you, Jay, are trying to do just that. The way you wrote your book, the way you are interacting with us, the way you've taken the lead to say, hey, let's have this discussion, I believe is going to contribute to shaping you over time. I've listened to your podcast with some of your other guests, and some of the stuff you guys get into is pretty intense and pretty impressive. And I go, wow, that's amazing. Versus sometimes when I listen to us talk, it's more like campy fireside chat talk, but that's okay. You need that too, right? You need a little bit of that too. But I go back to the same thing. I think that yeah, of course, free will goes hand in hand with morals and values. It has to, okay? Because
I
your
think so.
decision is going to be based on that foundation, right? Your decisions are going to take into account that foundation. Um, but I was going to say, you said something, I want to get this across. You said something earlier about like the dictator, and you talked about believing in God. And what if the dictator believes in God? What if they believe that their morals and values are, in fact, of the highest measure? And they're taking this action, and in their mind, they're thinking, what is wrong with these people? I'm doing this in the best interest of everybody, right? How do you
Well, often that's the case.
they're drinking their own Kool-Aid and they have no idea that they are.
I think this is where, though, like someone like a Peterson will talk about, well, what do you mean by believe?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a concept or an activity?
So
Mm.
I would
I
say
think
actually
conceptualization. Go ahead, Andrew.
those who are very religious don't have free will. Because they have
Wow.
actually
Wow.
they look at their actions, are like what they do, how they decide to not only not only their actions but their thoughts, are if they're impure thoughts that go against the dogma of their religion, like takes away any kind of free will. So religion takes away free will. Religion
Wow.
conflicts with free will. So maybe that's why, as someone who, well, I guess I identify as Jewish and look at, but I don't consider myself very religious. Maybe that's why, like, I'm like, yeah, of course we have free will. And maybe also, just if you look at, I also look at Judaism. For the most part, they're like, okay, just do what you want. Just don't be an asshole. Follow some rules. Like there, but there's, like, and I think, and of course, it varies from sect of Judaism to other areas of Judaism. Um, but I think religion takes away free will from us.
Oh, that I, I am going to agree with Andrew on that, and I'll tell you why. Because there's an old saying about, the reason we have religion is to help guide the sheep, right? In other words, you're shepherding the herd, shepherding the herd. So you get into a certain religion, you're born into it. I was born into being a Catholic, and the way that works is when you're born, you're anointed with water. You're basically been baptized, right? Whereas my son was baptized after he was like, I don't know, 20, maybe he was like 21 years old or something like that. And that decision was his decision at the time. He had a girlfriend, and she was very Catholic, very staunch Catholic. Um, and as a result of it, he got into it, and then he got himself baptized. Why? Where am I going with it? To Andrew's point, religion is provided to help. Is guidance. Stay within these guidelines. Now, to your point, Andrew, I am not a practicing Catholic. I never have been, but I went to church a lot, right? When I got married in a non-denominational church because my wife was not of any particular religion, any particular following. So, we kind of broke the rule that, the Catholic to Catholic, Jewish to Jewish, all that good stuff. But I do follow
All right.
the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments have always been what I look to, and I go, if I just follow this basic plan, I think I'll be good. Thou shalt not steal, covet another man's wife, all this stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at it, why do we write these rules? We write these rules to help govern and keep people in alignment, to create some sort of level of control, to create some sort of narrative that everybody agrees to and goes, are you good with that? Are you good with that? Yeah, I'm good. We're good. This is the foundational guideline we're going to follow and walk to. And if anything deviates out of that, we need to have a discussion. But there still could be choices within each one of those that give us some free will within that. You guys follow me? Remember we were talking about Jay in the last one in self culture was talking about zigzagging all around all these decisions. He said, I'm just like, I'm over here, then I'm over here, and I'm over here. And then I said, well, that could be true when you're making all these different decisions. But if you pulled back far enough, you're inside this sphere and you're making all these micro decisions, but the sphere is still moving in a direction. It's still orbiting around the primary like this, but internally there's a lot of back and forth decisions being made. But holistically, it's still following the path that it needs to follow. I hope I said that right. But that to me, I feel like that feels very common knowledge to me. It feels like something that makes sense to me. And what drives all those little decisions? Upbringing, values, religion, beliefs. Belief to me is something that you just choose to believe in. Somebody presents you something, they say, this is God, this is what God represents, this is the Trinity, blah, blah, blah. And you look back and go, okay, this makes good sense. But I
Well,
will
but
tell
this
you,
is, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, what I was going to tell you though, but you get enough humans behind something, you look at the world and you pull back and you look at Christianity, there's a huge movement. It's a powerful influence, especially across the United States. I'm the minority. Andrew's the minority. You might be the minority. You know what I mean?
Well, I think when it comes to the religious conversation, I would liken it to we confuse brand with product.
Hmm. Explain.
You mentioned, figurehead, if that's
Mm-hmm.
the Buddha
Mm-hmm.
and that's the founder. I fall in love with the personal brand of the founder. That I have an expectation of what that religion is, of what that product is based on the brand. Oh, Christianity. Oh, Buddhism.
Right.
The product is the fruit. The product are the activities that I don't and do act out. I think when we think about religion, when we talk about religion, we as in like people generally, we confuse brand and founder with product. The customer experience has a relationship with the fruit of the activities.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's an infinite amount of ideologies that because what is an ideology? It's an idea that's been pathologized into behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's 7 billion people. Let's say there's 7 billion subjectivisms, subjective ideologies, or ideas. Like we all, we come up with stories to like Get up, get out of bed, and feed ourselves. We don't just all sit there in bed and starve ourselves to death. That's the end of the species. This
You're correct.
infinite expanse of time and space, we don't know anything. So we come up with ways to like know enough to know that we need to keep going. And so there's an infinite amount of ideologies.
Yes.
But what makes a religion different than an ideology or a cult of personality? It's the fruit. Like it's survived over time because the customer service ratings are high enough based on customer experience that future generations keep doing the things or not doing the things that are
Right.
keeping the species going. So like the religions almost they're like filtered over generations that there's certain ideas, there's certain concepts in the morass of information,
Right.
literature, public figures, hypocrites teaching the word that there's wisdom. So I just want to be clear. I think shit, there's like the fire alarm going off. I'll go check on that real quick. But if you guys can unpack your
Culture.
smoking ass, hold
Yeah.
on.
Culture.
Keep going.
That's fucking culture right there. But by the way, talk about the Ten Commandments. I follow George Carlin's Two Commandments, which thou shalt always be honest and faithful to provider of thy nookie, and thou shalt try really hard not to kill anyone. Unless, of course, they pray to a different invisible man than the one you pray to. He is George Carlin deduces all of the Ten Commandments down to these two things. It's probably one of my favorite Carlin skits.
I think that guy personally is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is actually one of those bright minds for sure. That's funny, Andrew.
Uh,
Um, yeah, well, I mean, when you think about what Jay just said, when you think about what Jay is talking about here, I mean, look, at the end of the day, yeah, religion, is it an ideology? I guess it could be thought that way. I mean, who's to say which religion is the actual right religion? If you and I were born in India, we'd have what that would be what Hinduism we'd probably be following, right? And we would believe it. We would probably believe it hook, line, and sinker. Or we would be like you and I are. We go, oh, we get it. But you know what? Why didn't we follow it? Like, okay, so here, I want to open up a bag of worms here. You and I are great examples. You said, I'm Jewish, but I don't really follow that whole, I'm not practicing, I don't know that, you're going to temple and you're wearing your yarmulke. I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe your dad did. I don't know. But that is a result of that's generational. That could be just like my dad. My dad was raised Catholic all his life, right? But he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He was like, you know what? Live and let live. Be a good person. Watch your own yard. I don't need anybody shoving anything down my throat and telling me what I need or not need to believe in. That was my father. That dad, may you rest in peace. But my dad was like, you know, it, it wasn't oil and water, but he would get his belly full of a lot of it and he'd just go, you know what? He would he he would he he just was not having it. Didn't mean he didn't believe in God, but he was always seeking other answers. My father was. My dad was an agnostic, not an
but
atheist. He was an agnostic.
Paul, let me ask you this though: Your
Okay.
dad,
So
your
what
dad,
made him, here's my point, and I don't want to lose your thought. What made him decide that? Was that his own free will? Being born and raised in a Catholic household? My grandparents went to church every Sunday. And if I spent the night, I'm going too, whether I wanted to or not. Kneel, sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand, light a candle, ring a bell. I mean, it was all my whole life. But then I have my dad over here trying to teach me to think for myself and to explore other options and to read more. I give that to my father. So the way I am is a result of my upbringing. I had a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and I had the free will to go that one. Or you know what? I like a little bit of what this one's given me. I'll take a little bit of that and I'm going to take a little bit of that one. Here's what I think. Make sense?
Yeah.
Is that too pragmatic? But that to me contributes to how you think and how you're shaped. Andrew, you were going to say something. Let me ask you this. What?
So, was your dad a moral person?
Oh my God, one of the most moral people I
Yeah.
know.
And were his parents very religious?
They were, but they were not to the point. Yes, they were. My grandmother more so than my grandfather, but they had great morals and values, and they had good sense of humor, and they were not tight up the ass. You know what I'm saying? That
Yeah,
way.
yeah, sure. And
Yeah.
maybe the great grandparents were a little more stricter to religion, and I just believe that as time goes on, we've learned, okay, something, as society, without the structure of religion,
There you
we
go.
should be good to each other, because there's all these religions, we're not all right. There's there We're definitely, most religions are wrong. So let's say one of them has it right. Most of them are wrong. So like, and that's just, and I think that's stretching the imagination. But at the end of the day, we're teaching people to do, actually, to make the right moral decisions, to follow, the Ten Commandments,
Yeah.
of life.
Yeah.
I think, and as maybe as time goes on, as we understand, why it's bad, to do these things, why it impacts culture, to steal, to fuck your neighbor, to do things actually that violate the Ten Commandments. We understand it's not just because some imaginary force is going to impact you, but because it's bad for the culture.
Right.
And that's free will. Free will is, I
Well,
think.
but this I think people underestimate that imaginary force. Any of us that have sinned, we know that that imaginary force isn't imaginary
Wow. That's pretty.
because
That's pretty profound. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's,
that
yeah,
this is
okay.
like the imaginary like the right yeah, okay, so there's like a hell, but it's like
Maybe
if
that
I
is.
commit atrocities and I go to prison, I'm in hell.
Okay, yeah, yeah, okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Like
Yeah.
there's some real aspects to the to like after to the idea of the afterlife or the like metaphor what can we take these metaphors more literally? That's a funny like I have definitely lived in and experienced evil.
So, Jay, if you mind,
So that's
I
just
don't I don't hit my numbers. I don't hit my sales numbers. I'm that salesperson. I didn't hit my sales numbers. Now I'm up for probationary review. That's fucking corporate hell.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's such a
there are
true point.
consequences for the sins of
So we have no
commission.
free will.
I don't know. Listen, I I know that we're still on this, but like, yeah, we're of all the people in the world, we're gonna solve this in a podcast. It'll be a regular conversation, but I think the I think it's been a nice start to the conversation. We'll have to. I would challenge our listeners to listen. The cool thing about this excerpt is like a very different conversation than the recent one we had on the show, and it's just a testament to just how great I am and how great this book is. Uh,
I love
So
that.
as yeah, just a little insecure loserville there.
What if you were,
Just
what
how
if
great of a culture we have, how
we
great
do?
people, and that we're just exploring these ideas together, and what a testament to um the emotional disarray that I was in at the time and while writing this. I was recently thinking about like what happened to my creativity, what happened to my passion. I feel like I've lost it, um, and lost my ability to write so emotionally. And so this has like inspired me to write again and to put some pen to paper and get the new book out. So I appreciate you guys for participating in this ideology with me. Um, yeah, I guess just some final thoughts for our listeners.
Hmm. Well, Andrew, you got any final thoughts,
I
brother?
mean, I'm just I came into this, saying actually that that we all have free will, and now I'm questioning myself. It's like I under like it's taken an hour and 30 minutes to me to understand actually the the question of whether we do have free will, and religion is religion's just our it's our religion, community, company, family. It's all the same. It's all it's all actually some structure that we live in. It's all our culture.
Well said. Yeah. I don't think I have anything profound to say. I think what Andrew said, I agree with him. I mean, look, at the end of the day, um, we've agreed to a certain doctrine, we've agreed to a certain set of principles, and we live within that. And so the choices that we make are driven by a lot of those values. So it's back to the lion inside the cage. The lion is free to do whatever he can do within that domain, within that space. Okay, but the space is defining is defining the parameters. The parameter and or perimeter of the cage is both words I think kind of apply. There are parameters within, but there's the perimeter of the cage. And our perimeter is like Andrew said, it could be let's just pick on religion. Religion could be one of those. And it could dictate how you behave, how you react, what you say. Yeah, that's what I think.
Well, the last sentence says, however, let us create one together and be sure to write and speak what you believe, for that is the answer that matters. Page 21 and 20 on 30 Days of Thought. Pick up your copy if you're listening to this. Thank you, Andrew and Paul. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you very soon.